My world shattered a little after 2 o'clock in the morning when my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, wandered into my bedroom crying so hard she could barely breathe. She wrapped both arms around her stomach and looked up at me with terrified eyes. "Mommy," she whispered through her tears, "there are tiny fish swimming inside my tummy." At first I thought she had simply woken from a nightmare. I pulled her into my arms, brushed the damp hair from her forehead, and checked for a fever, but her skin felt cool. Even so, sweat soaked through her pajamas, and her small body kept curling into itself as if invisible hands were twisting her from the inside. The fear that rushed through me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I didn't waste another second. I wrapped her in the nearest blanket, grabbed my keys, and rushed into the cold night. The pediatric emergency department was nearly empty when we arrived, filled only with the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of medical equipment. A young doctor examined Lily, then immediately ordered an ultrasound without offering much explanation. I carried my daughter through the quiet hallway while she buried her face against my shoulder, trembling. She kept asking me not to leave her, and I promised over and over that I never would. During the scan, the technician hardly spoke. His expression slowly changed from calm concentration to obvious concern as he moved the probe across Lily's tiny stomach. I stared helplessly at the gray images on the monitor, unable to understand anything they showed. When the examination ended, he simply handed me the report and instructed me to return to the emergency physician. The moment the doctor looked at the results, every trace of color disappeared from his face. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. He didn't explain the findings. He didn't reassure me. Instead, he hurried out of the room and disappeared toward the nurse's station. Curious and frightened, I stepped into the hallway just in time to hear him speaking quietly into the telephone. "This is Children's Emergency Hospital. I need police officers immediately. We have a young child with evidence suggesting deliberate abuse. Multiple foreign objects appear to be inside her digestive system." My mind refused to process what I had just heard. Abuse? Foreign objects? None of it made sense. Lily had been with me all day. She was still crying softly in the examination room, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding around us. Before I could ask a single question, 2 police officers entered the department. They approached me without hesitation. The older officer looked directly into my eyes and asked his first question. "Who is responsible for caring for this child?" My legs instantly gave way beneath me. I slid down the wall while clutching Lily as tightly as I could. Minutes later I found myself sitting inside a small interview room while surgeons prepared my daughter for emergency surgery. Being separated from her felt unbearable. Every second away from her hurt more than I could describe. Across the table sat Detectives Harris and Monroe. Harris quietly wrote notes while Monroe asked every question. "Your name?" "Sophia Carter." "Age?" 31. "Your daughter's name?" "Lily Carter." "She's 6. Where is her father?" My voice shook. "My husband, Ethan, is returning from a business conference. I've called him several times, but he hasn't answered yet." Detective Monroe leaned forward. "Doctors discovered dozens of high-powered magnetic balls inside your daughter's intestines. Do you know anything about toys like that?" I stared blankly at him. "No. We don't own anything like that." He explained that the magnets could attract each other through the walls of the intestines, tearing holes inside the body and causing life-threatening infections. Every sentence struck me harder than the last. My hands began shaking uncontrollably. "Think carefully," he continued. "Could she have found them somewhere else? A friend's house? A neighbor?" I desperately searched my memory, but nothing fit. "No. I check every toy she plays with. I'm always careful." He interrupted again. "Do you work outside the home?" "No. I'm with Lily every day." The room suddenly felt much colder. Monroe stared at me for several long seconds before quietly asking the question that shattered what little strength I had left. Then how does a little girl under your constant supervision swallow dozens of dangerous magnets without you noticing? Tears poured down my face before I could answer. I don't know, I cried. I swear I don't know. Just then the interrogation room door flew open. Ethan rushed inside, breathing heavily, his tie hanging loose around his neck. Right behind him came his mother, Margaret. Relief washed over me for only a brief moment before everything changed. Instead of asking how Lily was, Ethan looked directly at me with anger burning in his eyes. Sophia, he demanded, what happened? I told you to keep dangerous things away from her. How could you let this happen? His words hit me harder than any accusation from the detectives. Margaret hurried toward him, pretending to sob as she wrapped her arms around his shoulder. Oh, my poor granddaughter, she cried dramatically before turning her attention to me. Sophia, raising a child is exhausting, but this level of carelessness is unforgivable. If anything happens to Lily, I don't know how we'll survive. Every word painted me as an irresponsible mother before anyone even knew the truth. Ethan continued staring at me with disappointment instead of concern. Say something. Explain what you did. I looked from my husband to his mother and realized neither of them was searching for answers. They had already decided I was guilty. At that exact moment Detective Monroe placed Lily's X-ray on the table between us. Dark clusters filled the image. Your daughter swallowed at least several dozen magnetic beads, he said calmly. The surgeons believe this was unlikely to be an accident. Someone may have intentionally given them to her. My heart nearly stopped as every person in the room slowly turned to look at me. The operating room doors closed behind the medical team, leaving me alone in a hallway that suddenly felt colder than winter itself. Every passing second was torture because my little girl was somewhere beyond those walls fighting for her life while I sat surrounded by people who believed I had put her there. Ethan refused to meet my eyes. Margaret continued sniffling dramatically, occasionally shaking her head as if mourning the tragedy caused by an irresponsible mother. Neither of them offered me comfort. Instead, I could almost feel their silent judgment pressing against me. Nearly 2 hours later, the lead surgeon finally stepped outside. His exhausted expression told me the operation had been far more difficult than anyone had hoped. I rushed toward him before anyone else could speak. Doctor, how is my daughter? He glanced at me briefly before addressing Ethan. Are you the father? Ethan nodded immediately. Yes. Please tell us she's going to be okay. The surgeon removed his surgical cap and sighed. She survived, but the situation was extremely serious. We removed 38 magnetic beads from her digestive system. Several parts of her intestine had already been permanently damaged. We had no choice but to remove sections of bowel to save her life. She'll recover, but this surgery will affect her health for many years. Relief flooded through me for only a heartbeat before another horrifying question followed. Based on the condition of her injuries, the surgeon continued, those magnets had likely been inside her body for at least a full day. Why wasn't she brought to the hospital sooner? Ethan spun toward me so quickly that I flinched. What was wrong with you yesterday? He shouted loudly enough for nearby families to stare. Didn't you notice she was sick? Were you paying attention to anything at all? Margaret immediately joined him. I've always said children need constant supervision, she declared through fake tears. Instead of focusing on family, some mothers spend their time distracted by everything else. Poor Lily paid the price. I barely heard either of them. My attention remained fixed on the surgeon because one question refused to leave my mind. Doctor, I asked quietly, could a 6-year-old child really swallow almost 40 magnets by herself? He hesitated before answering honestly. Realistically? No. Swallowing even one would be unpleasant because of the metallic taste. Swallowing dozens one after another would be extremely painful. Most children would stop immediately. My heartbeat accelerated. So how could it happen? He looked around the hallway before lowering his voice. The most likely explanation is that someone encouraged her, pretending they were candy or part of a game, convincing her to swallow them one at a time. Silence swallowed the corridor. Ethan's anger disappeared for the first time since arriving. Margaret's dramatic crying also stopped. I slowly turned toward both of them. Ethan looked shocked, but something entirely different flashed across Margaret's face. It lasted only a second, yet I recognized it instantly. Fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. In that single moment, something deep inside me changed. Until then I had been desperately trying to defend myself. Now I understood something far more important. Someone had deliberately hurt my daughter, and whoever it was wanted everyone to believe I was responsible. If I didn't uncover the truth, Lily would never receive justice. I stepped away from the bench and pulled out my phone. My closest friend, Rachel, answered on the second ring. Sophia? What's happening? I need your help, I whispered. Meet me at my house as soon as possible. Bring your laptop. I ended the call before she could ask questions. Ethan immediately blocked my path. Where do you think you're going? Home. Absolutely not. His voice grew sharp again. Our daughter is lying in intensive care, and now you want to leave? Margaret grabbed his arm. See, she said loudly. Does that sound like a worried mother? She's thinking about herself. I ignored both of them. I'm going home because I intend to find whoever poisoned my daughter. Margaret's fingers tightened around Ethan's sleeve so hard her knuckles turned white. I noticed it immediately. Ethan grabbed my wrist. You're not going anywhere. I pulled free. Why are you trying so hard to stop me? His answer came too quickly. Because I think you're trying to destroy evidence. Those words erased every remaining doubt. Instead of arguing, I dialed Detective Harris directly. He answered almost immediately. Mrs. Carter? Detective, I believe evidence proving my innocence is inside my house, but my husband and mother-in-law are physically preventing me from going there. I deliberately kept my eyes on Margaret while speaking. Her face lost every trace of color. Ethan reached for my phone. Give me that. I stepped backward. They're claiming I want to destroy evidence, I continued, but I believe someone else is afraid of what I'll find. Harris remained silent for several seconds before replying in a firm voice. Do not leave the hospital alone. Stay where you are. Officers are coming to escort you. Ethan froze. Margaret's fake crying vanished instantly. She opened her mouth but couldn't speak. 15 minutes later, Detectives Harris and Monroe returned with another officer. Ethan immediately tried explaining that I wasn't thinking clearly because of the stress, but neither detective seemed convinced. Harris asked me one simple question. What exactly are you expecting to find? A security camera, I answered. Last year several houses in our neighborhood were broken into, so I installed a camera overlooking our living room and dining table. If someone gave Lily those magnets inside our house, there's a chance everything was recorded. The detectives exchanged a quick glance. Margaret accidentally gasped. It was quiet, but everyone heard it. Harris looked directly at her before turning back to us. No one enters that home without police supervision. No electronic devices, memory cards, or recordings will be touched until we examine everything. Ethan tried protesting, but Harris cut him off. Right now this residence is considered a possible crime scene. We aren't taking any chances. As we walked toward the parking lot, I noticed Margaret trembling uncontrollably. She wasn't worried about Lily anymore. She was terrified of whatever that camera might reveal. The drive home felt endless. I sat in the back seat beside Detective Harris while Rachel followed us in her own car. Ethan drove behind the police vehicle with Margaret sitting silently beside him. Throughout the journey I kept staring at my phone, terrified it would ring with terrible news from the hospital. Every minute that passed without hearing Lily's voice felt unbearable. When we finally arrived, the detectives instructed everyone to remain outside until they secured the house. Ethan argued that it was his property, but Detective Monroe stopped him immediately. "Not tonight," he said firmly. "Until we understand what happened to your daughter, this is an active investigation." We stepped inside together. Everything looked exactly as I had left it in the middle of the night. Lily's coloring book was still lying open on the dining table beside a handful of crayons. Her tiny slippers rested near the couch, one tipped over as though she had kicked it off while running to me hours earlier. The sight nearly broke me. Rachel gently squeezed my shoulder, silently reminding me to stay focused. I pointed toward the small shelf above the television. "The camera is there." Margaret laughed nervously. "That old thing? I didn't even know it still worked." I turned toward her. "It worked yesterday." Her smile disappeared. Detective Harris asked everyone to step back while Rachel opened my laptop and logged into the camera's recording system. My fingers shook so badly that I entered the password incorrectly twice before finally gaining access. The loading icon spun for what felt like forever before yesterday afternoon appeared on the screen. The living room looked peaceful. Lily sat at the dining table happily coloring pictures of fish while humming to herself. I smiled through my tears because I remembered that moment. A few seconds later my own image crossed the background carrying a basket of laundry upstairs. Then Margaret entered the room. She sat beside Lily wearing the same warm grandmotherly smile that had fooled everyone for years. "What are you drawing?" she asked sweetly. "Fish," Lily answered proudly. "Mommy says we'll visit the aquarium one day." Margaret smiled wider. "That sounds lovely. I have something much more magical to show you." She reached into her handbag and placed several tiny silver balls onto a napkin. Lily tilted her head curiously. "What are those?" "They're special little pearls from the sea," Margaret whispered. "If a brave little girl swallows them, tiny fish begin swimming happily inside her tummy." I felt every muscle in my body freeze. On the screen Lily giggled uncertainly. "Really?" "Of course. It's our little secret." Lily hesitated. "Can Mommy see?" Margaret gently stroked her hair. "No, sweetheart. Mommy wouldn't understand magic. She would only throw them away. Promise you won't tell her." The room around me seemed to disappear. My daughter trusted her completely. She believed every word. I watched in horror as Margaret handed Lily one small magnet after another. Each time Lily swallowed one, she made an uncomfortable face. "They taste funny," she whispered. Margaret laughed softly. "That's how you know the fish are waking up." Beside me Ethan whispered one broken word. "Mom." Margaret immediately pointed toward the screen. "That's not what happened. You're misunderstanding." Nobody answered her. The recording continued. Lily rubbed her throat, obviously uncomfortable, but Margaret continued encouraging her with gentle praise until more and more magnets disappeared. Eventually Lily held her stomach. "It hurts." Margaret kissed the top of her head. "Only because the little fish are swimming. It'll stop soon." Rachel began crying beside me. Detective Monroe quietly paused the recording. The house fell completely silent. I turned toward Margaret, unable to recognize the woman standing before me. "How many did you give her?" She backed away slowly. I don't know." The surgeons removed 38. Her breathing became uneven. "I never counted." Ethan stared at his mother as though seeing a stranger. "Tell me she isn't telling the truth." Margaret grabbed his arm desperately. "I wasn't trying to hurt Lily. I thought she'd only get a stomachache." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why?" I asked. Why would you do this? Tears finally appeared in her eyes, but they no longer looked convincing. Because you were taking her away from me. She pointed directly at me. You controlled everything. Every decision. Every visit. She loved you more than anyone else. Ethan, needed to see that you weren't the perfect mother everyone believed you were. If Lily became sick while she was with you, everyone would finally realize you couldn't take care of her. My stomach turned. So you used my daughter to destroy me? She shook her head frantically. I thought she'd only feel sick for a day. I never imagined surgery. Detective Harris stepped forward. Mrs. Bennet, are you admitting that you deliberately gave your granddaughter these magnets? Margaret looked around the room, realizing there was nowhere left to hide. The camera had captured everything. Every lie had collapsed in front of her. She covered her face with both hands. I never wanted this, she whispered. Detective Monroe gently took hold of her wrists before placing handcuffs around them. You have the right to remain silent. Margaret screamed as neighbors opened their curtains to watch police lead her outside. Sophia ruined this family, she shouted. Detective Harris calmly replied, No. You did that the moment you decided to turn a child into a weapon. The police car door slammed shut, and for the first time since the nightmare had begun, I knew the truth could no longer be buried. Yet there was no feeling of victory inside me. My daughter was still lying in a hospital bed, recovering from injuries she should never have suffered. That was the only thing that mattered now, We returned to the hospital just before dawn. My entire body ached from exhaustion, but I refused to leave Lily's side for even a second. She looked impossibly small beneath the white blankets, surrounded by machines whose quiet beeping reminded me how close I had come to losing her forever. I gently took her tiny hand in mine, afraid to squeeze too tightly. After several minutes, her eyelids slowly fluttered open. Mommy, she whispered weakly. Tears instantly filled my eyes. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. She looked around the room, confused by the tubes and monitors before asking the question that shattered my heart all over again. Are the little fish gone now? I kissed her forehead. Yes, baby. They're gone. They can't hurt you anymore. She gave a tiny nod before adding something that made the room feel painfully silent. Grandma told me not to tell you. She said it was our special secret and that you'd get angry if I did. I felt my chest tighten. Before I could answer, I noticed Ethan standing quietly near the doorway. His face was pale, and his eyes were swollen from crying. Lily saw him too. Daddy. She whispered. He took one hesitant step toward her, but she instinctively pulled the blanket closer around herself. It was only a tiny movement, yet it broke him completely. He stopped where he was, unable to move another inch. Later that morning, Detective Harris visited my room with several documents. His expression had changed completely. Mrs. Carter, he said respectfully, after reviewing the security footage and Mrs. Bennet's statement, you are no longer considered a suspect in this investigation. I nodded without saying anything. Those words should have brought relief, but instead they left me feeling empty. A few hours earlier, everyone had believed I was capable of hurting my own daughter. Now they knew the truth, but nothing could erase what Lily had endured. Over the following days, the investigation uncovered even more disturbing details. Margaret admitted she had planned everything for weeks. She had repeatedly complained to relatives that I was too protective of Lily and that I refused to let her interfere with our parenting. She believed that if Lily became seriously ill while under my care, Ethan would finally lose faith in me and allow his mother to become the dominant figure in our family. She never expected the magnets to nearly kill my daughter, but she willingly risked Lily's safety to satisfy her own jealousy. Ethan read the investigator's report in complete silence. When he finally looked at me, his face was filled with regret. I believed her, he whispered. Instead of trusting you, I accused you. I looked at him calmly. Before the police suspected me, you already had. He lowered his head because he knew I was right. Some wounds cannot be repaired with apologies. Before Lily was discharged from the hospital, I hired an attorney. Together we filed for an emergency protective order preventing Margaret from ever contacting my daughter again. At the same time, I made the painful decision to end my marriage. Ethan begged me to reconsider, insisting he would spend the rest of his life earning back my trust, but I couldn't forget the way he had looked at me while our daughter was fighting for her life. In his moment of greatest fear, he had chosen to believe the worst about me instead of standing beside me. That truth changed everything. Months later, the criminal trial began. I testified only once. The prosecutor played the security footage for the courtroom exactly as we had watched it that night. Every person present saw Margaret smiling as she convinced an innocent little girl to swallow dangerous magnets while calling them magical pearls. The surgeon explained how close Lily had come to dying. Detective Harris described my determination to preserve the evidence rather than hide it. Finally, Margaret herself took the stand. She cried, apologized, and claimed she had only wanted to teach me a lesson, never imagining such terrible consequences. The judge listened carefully before delivering his decision. Margaret was found guilty on multiple criminal charges involving child abuse and intentional endangerment. She received a lengthy prison sentence and was permanently prohibited from contacting Lily. Ethan sat silently through the entire hearing, unable to defend either his mother or himself. Our divorce became final several months later. I received full custody of Lily, while Ethan was granted limited supervised visitation until the court determined that rebuilding trust with his daughter was possible. He accepted every condition without argument because he knew he had already lost far more than a marriage. Recovery wasn't easy for Lily. She required additional medical appointments, special dietary restrictions, and months of careful observation. Some nights she still woke frightened, asking whether bad secrets could return. Every time she asked, I reminded her that truly loving adults never ask children to hide things that could hurt them. Slowly, her smile returned. She laughed more often. She began drawing fish again, but this time they lived safely on paper instead of inside frightening memories. Nearly a year after everything happened, we moved into a small house filled with sunlight, fresh flowers, and peace. One afternoon I watched Lily sitting at the kitchen table, proudly showing me another colorful drawing covered with smiling fish. For just a moment my heart skipped, remembering the terrible night when she first told me they were swimming inside her stomach. Then she looked up and smiled. These fish are happy, Mommy. They don't bite. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of crayons and shampoo. Margaret had tried to destroy my life by turning my own child into evidence against me. Ethan had doubted me when I needed him most. The police had questioned me before discovering the truth. But none of that defined our future anymore. Lily survived. I survived. And from that day forward I promised myself that no one would ever again make my daughter believe that love should be hidden behind dangerous secrets. That was the real ending to our story, not revenge, not punishment, but the quiet certainty that we were finally safe, and that no one would ever be allowed to steal that safety from us again.